Kim Calloway. I'm the Director and Founder of Children's Safety Australia, and today we are joined by Detective Inspector John Rouse, APM. Now, John is the Manager of Operations, Victim Identification and Training for the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation. Welcome, John.
Thank you very much.
Now, before we kick off with some questions for John, I'd like to outline a bit of his background. So John has 37 years service with the Queensland Police. In 1996, John began investigating crimes against children, and in 2001 he commenced a Task Force Argos, where he implemented Australia's first operation to proactively target internet child sex offenders. He has instigated multiple national and international investigations targeting child exploitation criminal networks and has delivered training to law enforcement officers both in Australia and across the world. John is currently the chair of the Covert Internet Investigations Group, the Interpol Specialists on Crimes Against Children, and is a director with the Society for the Policing of Cyberspace. In July 2019, John was seconded to the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation, or ACE, to lead the Covert Online Operations Team, Victim Identification Unit, and Training Team. John is the recipient of 4 Commissioner's Certificates for his operational leadership and 2 Queensland Police Excellence Awards for child protection prevention. In May 2018, John accepted the Champion for Children Award in New York from the International Centre for Missing and Exploited Children in recognition of his dedication for over 24 years fighting and investigating crimes against children. John was awarded the Queensland Australian of the Year for 2019, and he is the recipient of the Queensland Police Medal, the National Service Medal, the Exemplary Conduct Medal, the National Police Medal, and the Australian Police Medal. John has been appointed as an ambassador for a number of Australian child protection organisations, including Act for Kids, Bravehearts, the Carly Ryan Foundation, and the Daniel Morecambe Foundation. And frankly, I'm unaware of anyone who has surpassed John in terms of dedication and hard work in the field of child protection. And through John's direct work, he has rescued children out of some of the most horrendous situations and brought many offenders to justice. So very happy to have you here today, John.
Absolute honour and a privilege. Thanks very much.
So John, you've been working in the field of child protection for over a quarter of a century. What first led you into this field?
Promotion, believe it or not. Yeah. So I was working at the Gap CIB as a detective senior constable, and I applied for promotion to detective sergeant, and I was successful in that process. And my first posting was to State Crime Command in the Child Abuse and Sexual Crime Group.
Wow.
So it wasn't by choice, it was by destiny, perhaps. I don't know.
That's amazing. And so no particular driving interest in child protection at that point, it just came as you became involved and I guess became aware of what's actually going on?
Yeah, correct. So for predominantly all of my criminal investigation experience before that, which was 8 years, none of the cases I was involved in involved child exploitation or child abuse at all, because as you know, we've got the specialist teams that deal with that. I was more involved in drug investigations, fraud, homicide, armed robbery, all of those kind of things. So it wasn't until I came into the command that I first dealt with the issue.
Wow. So is it a surprise looking back over your career where you've ended up at this point?
If I'd had a crystal ball back in 1984, I would not have seen this as being the path that I would have taken. But, you know, I don't regret that one little bit.
Absolutely, and thank goodness for all of us and for many, many children across the world that you were promoted and that you were, ended up in that
sliding
field.
glass door moments, you know.
Yeah. So because you have been in the field for such an extended period, you would have seen significant changes in the way offenders access children, particularly online. What are some of the current emerging trends that we should be aware of?
Well, the biggest thing that's on our plate at the moment is, and like when I started, we were primarily focused with child sex offenders that were either grooming children or in many cases we were dealing with trying to find the children in the images where they're being sexually abused by offenders. That was our primary focus. Where we sit now, and the most contemporary issue I think for child protection and for the community, is it started with the advent of the selfie, And where we're at now with self-produced content by children, that is absolutely crippling our capability. And it's horrendous for us to be dealing with content where we don't know where the child is, but in many cases they're clearly in their home and they're being sextorted by child sex offenders to produce content for them. And it's really, really difficult. So it's completely shifted its focus in that time. So yeah, that is our biggest critical issue at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're in a culture where everyone wants to be seen, everyone wants to self-promote and put themselves out there.
Yeah.
I don't know, I've got a teenage daughter myself who seems to be wearing less and less clothing and is on the phone all of the time, which it's, I guess, the prevention is so counter to culture, isn't it?
You're 100% correct. So this whole influences environment that we're in at the moment, and children are being, I guess, role modelled by the wrong people. They're wanting to emulate these people that they're seeing on Instagram, for example. And you see young kids pushing makeup lines and all sorts of things. But the reality is that is just such an opportunity for child sex offenders, and they are 100%. Masters at manipulating kids and getting them from Instagram into a place where they've got control of them, and that's definitely what we're seeing at the moment.
So the whole, I guess, topic of child sexual abuse is something that a lot of people find really uncomfortable, and unfortunately it tends to prevent a lot of parents from having frank discussions with their children because they just, I guess, don't want to acknowledge it, might feel uncomfortable speaking with their children about it. What advice do you have for those parents about how to get over that discomfort to actually actively protect their children?
It's a really good question because we've been struggling with that since the internet became a thing. And I think there's a lot of, it'll never happen to me, I've got a good relationship with my child and they talk to me, but the reality is, with what we're seeing, it's just not the case. And my advice to parents would be to make sure you understand the technology that your children are using. I've been saying that for 17 years. And keeping in mind that when we started, it was a desktop. They were locked down. You could actually supervise them. Now you can't. It's fully portable and mobile. So don't threaten to take the device away, is because they can sign into the accounts elsewhere. Just be mindful of that. That's not a solution. Key point one, understand the technology. You've given them the phone. So stop being their friend and start being their carer and guardian, because that's your job. Don't be worried about intruding on their privacy. That's your right as a parent. You provided them the device, unlock the phone please. Let's have a look at the applications you've got installed. I want to see how you're using them and I want to make sure that you're using them safely. Is that too hard to ask? Because the end result is if you do not take that interest in your child, somebody else will. And I'd be surprised in most cases if your child already has not seen inappropriate content or has not been approached inappropriately by somebody. But do you have the relationship with them where they're going to come and talk to you about that? That's the question.
Yeah, fantastic points. Is there a degree of IT savvy that parents need, or is it about having that, as you said, unlock your phone, show me what you're doing? Are there places parents can go, I guess, for advice on how to have a better understanding of particular apps that kids are using? Because I would imagine that a lot of children who are doing the wrong thing wouldn't be particularly forthcoming. They'd be showing them selected things. So any advice in terms of, I guess, educating parents when they can't get that from their children?
Sure. So number one, you don't need a degree in IT to take an interest in what your children are using with this technology. They're very simple applications. TikTok, Instagram, Kik, Snapchat. These are all really simple things to use. Where to go to? There's two immediate sources that I'd direct them. Number one is the ACE website, ACCCE. Right, because the ACE portal steers you across to all of the other places that you can find information. Think You Know is the AFP program for parental awareness, and of course Julie Inman and the Safety Commission. Both of those will tell you about the trends that we're seeing, and they provide you with a wealth of information about how to protect your kid. How to even start the conversation with your child is on those websites. So first stop, go there, and second stop, create an account. It only takes a few minutes. Open up an account on Snapchat. Start playing with the filters. Understand why children are actually attracted to these applications and why they're producing content. If you can do that and set up the basic security that's available in the apps, well, you're well underway to understanding the threat that it poses to your child.
And I guess to give an understanding to parents, I read a recent article where you were interviewed in relation to the prevalence, and if you're, basically indicating that your child is likely having been approached by someone already, is it that degree of prevalence that most people who are on these apps have been approached by someone that they shouldn't?
Yeah, there is no way I could with any certainty tell anybody that's going to listen to this that your child is safe. There's no way in the world I'll ever be able to do that. But what I can tell you is that, let me give you a quick case study. We arrest an offender who has groomed a child utilising Snapchat as the application. The child had over 100,000 contacts on Snapchat. Do the math. It's not hard, okay? An arrest not too long ago that we did at Argos. Offender grooms child and purports to be Justin Bieber. Child believes this, as did 157 other children and their families. These people are good at what they do, and they're after content from your child. So if this isn't generating some level of concern, really have a good look in the mirror.
Yeah.
Because this is real. And the other thing I'd steer you back to, 10 years ago, a young girl called Amanda took her life. Her suicide note is still on YouTube. Okay, where she used cards to explain what happened to her, and she took her life very soon after that. That's the reality of what's happening online. That was 10 years ago. I don't know the statistics on the number of children that have taken their lives since then, but once again, children don't have the cognitive ability to deal with what they're doing. They'll produce the content thinking it's a peer, a young attractive boy or girl that they're interested in getting to know. They'll make that one mistake, the offender captures it, and that's the end. Yeah. They've then got them.
The hook.
And I've read through the harrowing experiences young kids are going through where they activate their cameras, they're crying at the moment the camera's activated, and then for, in one instance, 37 minutes, this poor little girl does what this individual wanted her to do, and she's like 13 or 12 years of age, and I would not want to be that child's parent and seeing this content. It's just horrendous. So please take an interest, because we're seeing it here. Because the offenders are telling the children, if you do this, I won't put it on the internet and I won't share it across your friends. That's the hook. This will be our little secret. Well, how did it get into our hands as law enforcement? So they've shared it, and we've now got the content, and we're trying to find your child. Please take a moment to be interested in this.
Yeah. So in addition to having an understanding of what your children are doing online, you've indicated about behavioural changes to be aware of. If a child has been online, they come out and they're distraught, and the importance of having that relationship with children. As a parent, that's easier said than done.
Sure.
Are there any key tips? And I guess this is more so looking at your parenting advice, possibly more than child protection, particular strategies. But how to build that relationship? Are there any particular, practical strategies that you might have enforced?
So I grew up obviously with the internet and with a young daughter who was interested in technology due to my interest in technology. So I just took her on the journey with me, and I explained from the outset the dangers, the very simple things like, if you don't know this person in the real world, you don't know them. It's as simple as that. You can be whoever you want to be on the internet. So don't add friends that you don't know. It's really simple. If you haven't met them in the real world. So that conversation with my daughter resulted in her, when MSN Messenger was a thing, that was one of the very first communication apps that was put out, her just coming and saying, Dad, I just got a friend ad, and I went, what did we talk about? She said, block, and I went, correct. So we had that relationship, probably predominantly due to what I was dealing with in the criminal investigation sphere. But I never threatened to take the device away from her. I never threatened to block her internet access. I wanted her to use the technology because it is really, it has got good as well as evil associated with it. But that comes down to trust, open conversations, no threats or intimidation, or that was just the relationship I had with my kid as she grew up, and we still have. She's in Sydney now, but we still have that great.
Are there any particular age groups that parents should be focusing on, like where children are most likely to be targeted, or is it as simple as soon as your child is on a device where they have the potential to be approached by people, they need to know from that stage?
Yeah, look, if you're going to give your child a technology-enabled device like a phone or an iPad, it starts then. Quite simply. Now, realistically, if I had a young child now, I'd really question what device I gave my child. I was at some parents' forum not too long ago, and one of the parents and their young son was with them in the audience, and they had a dumb phone until they were 13.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's, for me, I'd probably be doing the same thing, because I want my child to be able to contact me if they're in trouble. That's why we give them a phone, right? But you're giving them a portable computer, with all of these apps on it. So if you're going to do that, understand the risks associated with it. And public Wi-Fi is available, so limiting their bandwidth is not necessarily a solution. So have the conversation. If you're going to give them a phone, it goes back to what we said before. Get onto those websites, arm yourself with the information, explore, and these apps are going to continue to evolve.
Yeah.
So I never particularly focus on one application when I'm talking about dangers, because they will evolve. They'll in years, this conversation will be a moot point if I continue to talk about Snapchat and Kik and TikTok, because they'll evolve. So give them the phone with understanding the risk that's associated with it.
And I guess also acknowledging that knowing what your child is doing on their device is one thing, but they can access content from friends, from school, from libraries, from many other opportunities. So it's having that general conversation with them anyway.
Yeah, it's just about the actual technology, that they're opening themselves to the world, which is really exciting. It's great, that it also has a lot of dangerous people in it, and I can certainly testify to that in the time I've had in the crime type. I think the other thing I'd implement if I was a parent of a young child now is that, when they go to bed, the devices stay with me.
Yes.
Okay? You're going to bed to sleep for a reason.
Absolutely.
Because you're not going to be up at 2 a.m. talking to random strangers, which is what they're doing.
So pleased to hear you saying that. I have a lockbox at my house,
Yep.
and my kids hand their phone in, and
Great.
they hate me for it.
Well,
They've made up videos about me trying to get people to hate me for doing it, but we continue to do it.
Well, I would mandate that. It's the same as even as adults now. If you go out to dinner, everybody put your phones in the middle of the table, okay? And the first person to grab their phone pays for the meal.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. Can we talk?
Yep. Yep. Now, we've spoken about the role of parents, but acknowledging that there's always going to be a proportion of parents that don't actively protect their children. What is the role of schools or teachers in this space?
Look, it's a good question, and I wouldn't, I know I have some friends that are teachers, and their curriculum is so full already. They're not the parents in this equation, okay? So I don't think we should be pushing the responsibility for raising your children across to your teachers. I think that the education system has a role to play, but overarchingly, the responsibility for raising that little person sits with mum, dad, parent, carer, guardian, not with the school.
Yeah.
Okay, it's the same as pushing sex education into schools. Really, is that who should be having the conversation here? I think personally, we load the education system up with too much responsibility that should be sitting back with the family.
Fair enough.
That's my personal view anyway. So.
Okay, no, that's good. So John, clearly police have a role to play in investigating child exploitation. Do they also have a role in prevention?
Look, I've always mandated that we do. At the end of the day, and if I go back to 2004, when Queensland Police Service first put out the Who's Chatting to Your Kids booklet, we recognised that there was this emerging threat called the internet. We're at the front line of seeing what's happening. So, and I adhere to a lot of Bob Atkinson's leadership as a commissioner back then, the Lantern Awards, and community engagement. Yeah, our responsibility isn't just to investigate the crime, but as we see these trends emerging, we need to put practices in place to stop the crime happening in the first place. And the internet is one of those places where we can do that. The conversation we're having right now about what we're seeing in the evolution in the crime is critical for parents to understand. Now, if we didn't put that messaging out, it'll just continue.
Yeah.
We're the end, for me anyway, we are the end game in this. When we're involved, it's happened. I'd like to be in the front of that.
Absolutely, yeah. So a growing number of predators are accessing children through social media platforms. What can social media platforms, app developers do to better protect children and to assist police with their investigations?
Yeah, good question. So let's just line ourselves up here with Julian McGrath from the Safety Commission and her mandate for safety by design. Safety by design is very simple. You're going to create a new application. It has to meet these criteria before it gets launched. One of those is that you've got safety built into it. You've got the ability for the individual who's using the application to secure their identity and not be spammed or cyberbullied or trolled or anything else. They can activate security provisions within the application. And you have a reporting functionality to law enforcement. Little things like that need to be built into applications. The challenge that we're facing is that all of the tech providers ran ahead unregulated and just did stuff. It'd be like car developers just churning them out without seatbelts in them. We've got laws around cycling. Wear a helmet. Why? Because people come off bikes and head injuries occur. So playgrounds have safety in mind when they create a playground, but the internet never had that. So what we're doing now, and Julie's doing a great job, is we're fighting back at these service providers to regulate that they will provide safety, because let's stop it happening. It goes back to what we said a moment ago. Stop it before it happens.
Absolutely.
And kids, they're just embracing the technology and just running ahead with it, running rings around their parents. And we've got a care factor of 0 from the technology providers.
So is there any enforcement requirement for social media platforms, and I guess we're talking retrospectively with the ones that already exist, is there anything that they can do or that they're willing to do? Or is it, and I know recently about the issue with encrypted messages, that is a massive issue. If you wouldn't mind talking about that, that would be... Yeah,
okay, so let's talk about, and this is a discussion around Facebook and the fact that they're moving to what's called end-to-end encryption, which means that your communications on their platform are unreportable. It's secure. Now, the position that Facebook has on that is around privacy. We want to ensure your privacy. That's why we're securing this communication stream and encrypting it. Now that's going to come with some. I'm all for privacy. Don't get me wrong. I want my privacy as well. Let's start with the fact that one of the platforms that responsibly reports the criminal use of their platform is Facebook. They own Instagram. They own WhatsApp. They are currently reporting the criminal violations that occur on their platforms to the National Centre for Missing Children in Washington. They then get sent globally, and we get them here in Australia. They're called cyber tips. We get about 21,000 a year from NECMEC. And about 70% of those are from service providers, i.e. Facebook. They're self-regulating at the moment, which is great. Now, the technology that they're using to self-regulate, and this will demystify the privacy issue. So Microsoft created a tool in 2008 called PhotoDNA, PDNA. All that simply means is that every image has got a unique fingerprint associated with it. So once law enforcement have verified that that image is child abuse material, a fingerprint is provided to service providers to run in the background across their technology. And that's as far as the intrusion happens, okay? So I send you a photograph of my dog running around in the park, or the trip to the beach, or what I'm eating right now. That's no problem. That PDNA just runs across the background. But if I send you an image that has been categorised by law enforcement as child abuse material, PDNA picks it up and reports automatically to NetBank.
Fantastic.
That's your intrusion on your privacy. I don't have a real problem with that. But they're saying that we're going to implement this because of your privacy, and once they do it, PDNA will not work anymore. We'll get this significant reduction in referrals. The case I mentioned before about the impersonator of Bieber with 157 child victims came in as a cyber tip from the use of Facebook. That's the kind of thing that we're going to lose visibility on. And that's why we're pushing back so hard on this. You know, that's not responsibility, that's sticking your head in the sand and going, I don't want to know about this anymore. We employ 40,000 people to service the range of trust and safety officers to support law enforcement inquiries. This is costing us a lot of money, and at the end of the day it's about money, let's face it. What about the privacy intrusion when, I don't know, I just quickly checked for a holiday somewhere and suddenly my stream comes up with travel companies, or what? Is that not an intrusion on my privacy? I don't know. Anyway, so I've got a real angst about it, because at the moment they are cooperating and they're being responsible and they're doing their best to help, but this will turn that off.
And have they actually, is this confirmed that they're going to encrypt, or are they listening to the advice from law enforcement?
Oh no, it's going ahead. They've made it very clear that it's going to be a staged implementation. The Commonwealth Government have had multiple dialogues with them. I've been party to some of those, and you know, you get some wonderful rhetoric from them about how wonderful and safe and everything is, but you know, the reality is the question that remains unanswered is, what's this going to mean post end-to-end encryption? They don't answer that question. So that's an indication of kind of where things are at the moment in terms of industry. And my personal view is that regulation has to be implemented. Go back to the car scenario. One rogue car company doesn't put seatbelts in. Okay, well, you know, that's pretty dangerous. So we need to regulate you and make you comply that to import your car into Australia, you will do this, because our safety of our citizens is critical. And that's, I think, where we're at the moment, is that regulation has to happen.
Absolutely. The e-Safety Commissioner, the Safety by Design guidelines that you mentioned earlier, is that being taken up? Are we seeing adoption of those principles? Yeah, look, you know, like I said, Julie and her team are doing a great job with that concept, and the We Protect organisation, which she sits on, are driving those principles across the Five Eyes partners and internationally. So a lot of app developers are adhering to it, and Julie's got a raft of new powers that are going to come in next year that will ensure compliance. So I think we're heading in the right direction, but you know, I'd just like to see some self-regulation responsibility. I wouldn't want to build an app that people could do this kind of thing on, but we're getting a care factor of 0. It's good, at least, I guess, have it tabled that it's very clear what needs to be done. That's a great start. Yeah, it is. Yeah. The evidence base is there, and we are talking openly about what we're seeing from the law enforcement perspective. You know, in the documentary, I think we talk about the fact that it takes a global village. We're one piece of this solution, law enforcement. Realistically, we're the end game when the bad has happened. There's so many things that can be done before that, and everybody needs to play their part. Parents, carers, guardians, governments, industry service providers. It's a global issue, and it's a village issue. Absolutely. Now, you mentioned the documentary, so the children in the pictures, it's being released in just a few days, highlighting the work of both Task Force Argos and ACE in shutting down global pedophile networks. How impacting are you expecting this documentary to be? And I understand that it took quite a long time in the making. I read 6 years, I don't know if that's accurate, to actually get this off the ground. Is this going to make a significant impact, do you believe? Good question. I've watched it twice, and I find it very hard to judge it, because you're kind of being part of this journey, and you know, you don't see anything bad in this documentary because you can't do that. So it was a real challenge for the filmmakers to try to convey what we're dealing with in a way that isn't going to make people not even want to watch it. The feedback I've had from both law enforcement partners and from just the community in whole is that they're finding that it's hitting the mark. But like I said, having been part of the whole
journey that is that documentary, I find it difficult personally to be objective on it, and I don't really personally want to watch it again because it's a lived experience, and there's a couple of moments in my life that play out in that documentary that, you know, I don't want to revisit because, I mean, you understand, we all law enforcement officers suffer some degree of post-traumatic stress from what we deal with, because whether it's child protection or road traffic command or homicide, or, you know, we deal with human tragedy. That's what we do. So you carry things with you as best you can. And for me, you know, particularly one part of it where they're talking about Operation Achilles, I made some decisions during that I had to, that, you know, they were really hard. And I don't really particularly want to relive that.
Fair enough. Just to clarify, it is targeting parents, the doco?
Yeah, look, I know that the filmmakers, when it went for classification, I think it was M+ or MA+ originally, and they fought that because they actually want Year 11 and Year 12 students to be able to understand this as well, and they successfully got the classification down. So yeah, it's definitely, it's everybody. You know, it's industry service providers. Have a look at what's going on. It's, you know, the governments, I think collectively the Australian government, state, territory and federal have done a fantastic job with our legislation. It's world leading legislation. So we're good in that space. But maybe, you know, with the things we've talked about so far today, maybe it might get a little bit more interest from parents, because Scott Anderson talks specifically about what he's dealing with in Victim ID upstairs at the moment, and this self-produced material that's inundating us at the moment. So that features in part of the documentary, which might be of interest.
Okay, well that sounds good. So I'm imagining then for, like you said, with the change of classification for senior students, 11s and 12s, you'd recommend it for them to watch for any parent that has a child that has any kind of access to a device?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're of an age that gets past the rating, watch it. And I don't think it's a bad thing for certainly senior students to have a look at, because, you know, there's a very rewarding career path in what we do. I mean, we get lots of inquiries all the time about the work that we do, and, you know, we're always looking for the right people to come and do this work. So maybe it might inspire the next generation of us as we approach retirement.
Yep. So we've spoken about the role of parents, teachers, or schools, I guess, less so, with the emphasis on parents, police, social media platforms. What advice would you give directly to young people who might be watching this? And I guess, would that differ from primary school age, for example, to secondary?
Yeah, look, it would, because I mean, and I would honestly say if there's secondary students watching this, they've been there, done that. Okay, they've already had the things we're talking about happen to them. So, my advice to them would be, talk to your junior peers about your lived experience. I've been working with Cheryl Varden and her team at the ACCCE for many years on the Out of the Dark project. And one of our challenges has been, how do we get kids to understand this? You know, crusty old detectives like me talking to them isn't going to work. We know that in many cases, parents aren't going to work either. So how do we get kids to understand the dangers of the technology? You know, you see 11-year-olds talking about dirty old ped that hit them up on, you know, this is happening to them. So, you know, one of the things we're talking about with Cheryl and QSCC was just having these mentors in schools who've had the lived experience to try to pass on that experience down the train to the younger kids. So look, the advice would be variable across the age groups. The younger kids, never send anything, okay? Never send any photograph, anything. Do not live stream. You've lost control of it. Amanda Todd is testimony to the fact that you've lost control of it, okay? Never hit send on something unless you would be happy that mum and grandma had seen that content. If you're second guessing that, don't hit send, okay? Because your moral compass is coming in alignment here and going, you know, good cop, bad cop, don't do it, don't do it. Well, what would mum and dad think? Okay, if they saw that image, use that as your moral compass about what you're going to hit send on. Talk openly to your parents about your experiences, okay? So if somebody's talking to you online and you're not comfortable with it, don't talk to mum and dad. please.
And I'm thinking if maybe mum and dad aren't available or aren't, find other trusted adults that you can go and have
Whoever
a
is in your
conversation with.
sphere, your circle of influence that you trust, go and talk to them and get some advice.
Yeah.
And if you do find yourself in a position where this is it's happening to you, that you are getting bullied, trolled, or sextorted, go and talk to one of those trusted people and get help.
Yeah.
Do not continue to comply with their demands, okay? Cease your communication, talk to your trusted person, and then if the advice that you get is to talk to us, secure your device, secure the evidence, and we will do our job.
In terms of securing the advice, what practical things do they need to do?
Well, the first thing I would be saying is cease your communication with the person that's doing this to you, okay? So stop that. And block them if you need to, that's fine. But do not delete anything.
Okay.
Do not close your account, do not delete any images, do not delete any texts or any communications. That's all critical evidence for us. So it's like a crime scene. Your phone, your device is now a crime scene, okay? Lock it down, stop engaging with the person that's done this to you, and it doesn't matter where in the world they are, we have reach, okay? And we can try to get something done to stop them doing this to other children.
Excellent. Fantastic advice. In an ideal world, funding's not an issue, resources are not an issue, influence is readily available. We can do pretty much anything. What's the best plan of attack to counter child exploitation?
Right, okay, I wish we had just pages again. It'd be a lot simpler. Look, in an ideal world, pretty much everything that we've discussed here today as being the solutions will be implemented. Tech and industry providers would be compliant. They would be thinking about their very broad customer base before they launch their next application. They'd be talking to us about what we need. They would be self-regulating. We wouldn't be forcing them into regulation. That'd be number one. In an ideal, perfect world, every law enforcement agency across the world would have the same capability. But we deal with countries that for various reasons have no technical skills. They're using Hotmail accounts for their official communications. Many countries don't have criminal legislation in place, so in an ideal world, we would have a level playing field across all facets. The law would be there, the capability would be there, children will be educated and aware from a very young age, and we would see such a reduction in what we're dealing with now. We're never going to stop people sexually abusing their children. Okay? That's just a fact. It's been happening for as long as recorded history has existed. So our role as police, I really wish I'd done myself out of a job in the 20 years I've been doing it, but I haven't. In fact, it's just got worse. The better we've become, the more we find. Perfect world, we wouldn't even have a role, but we will continue to have a role. But I'd like it to be a role that's focused back on where I started, which is trying to identify the people that are sexually abusing the children and bringing them to justice and removing these kids from harm. And get rid of this world I'm dealing with, and all of our colleagues internationally are dealing with at the moment, where we have kids in their own homes producing content. And it's just so distressing to deal with.
In terms of offenders themselves and demographics of offenders, like we know that, from what I understand from research, is that for in-person abuse, about a third of abuse is from other children or young people. Are you seeing any of that taking place? Does that carry over to online as well, or is there less children and young offenders?
That's a really good question. We ran our conference at the Gold Coast a few years ago on exactly this theme about children as offenders. When does it begin? And how does it manifest? Because we actually wanted those answers from some of the world's leading psychologists. It manifests very young, so that's why programs, I'm all about personally supporting alternate solutions to us coming in at the end. And one of the ones that I was really interested in was the Stop It Now program from the United Kingdom. And we actually had Michael Sheath come across. And I also invited Madeline Brandenburg across from the Netherlands, because she did a TED talk on the very, very difficult topic of us taking a different view to child sex offenders. And it was a really interesting TED Talk. And so we brought her in and we brought Michael Sheath in because at the moment, if you self-identify as having a sexual interest in children, what are your pathways?
There's not a lot available, is there?
There's none. Who do you talk to? You know, so where do they go? From our experience, they go online, and what they do once they're online is they actually find other people who feel like they do, and that just then reinforces that they're okay.
Yeah.
We'd like to see that not happen. So, you know, the Stop It Now program, we're at the beginning of a scoping study of that in Australia, and Jesuit Services are the champions behind it, to create a platform that these people can go, I don't want to hurt a child, how do I not do that? Now, that may not have, that may not see a really big impact on what we're seeing for many, many years, but let's start it now.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that came out of the YTVC conference many years ago, was starting to have this mature conversation about, let's just take the hate out of it.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember a friend of mine from the US said, it's not a sickness, it's not an illness, and it's not a disease. Okay, you don't catch this, right? It's, in many cases, they're born into having this sexual preference. Would we, you know, look at the homosexual community or the transgender? I mean, all of these different sexual interests exist in humanity, and one of them is sexual interest in children. Yeah, it's abhorrent. But we've got to give them some other solutions with how to deal with it, and I think a much touted law enforcement quote is, we're not going to prosecute our way out of this, okay? We're just perpetuating the cycle at the moment. We've got to find other ways. So that's a good solution, I think, going forward for young people and how it manifests itself. There's a range of things that impact on people's sexuality. You know, if they are sexually abused, there's evidence to say that time stamped, then you know, in many cases, we've arrested child sex offenders that will disclose that they were abused as a child, but they never spoke about it previously. And then you're going to go 50-50. Okay, is that a mitigator against your sentencing? I don't know. But I guess my overarching point is that we need to find other ways to deal with this. And I think that the Stop It Now program, and these programs run in Germany and in other countries as well, I think it's a good option.
Absolutely. And is it generally targeting young offenders, or is it offenders of all ages?
It'll be available to anyone who self-identifies. They'll be able to reach out for help. Yeah.
I think I was at that presentation actually at the conference, and you're just reminding me, hearing about it now. Fantastic.
Yeah, Madeline's TED Talk is available online. I'd encourage you to have a look. Madeline Vandenbergen, I can give you the details after this. Watch the TED Talk. It'll probably polarise your views in some way, but you know, I got Brian Cotter, the Assistant Commissioner, to come in and lead that half-day session because I wanted a senior member of our organisation to start the conversation. You know, and anyway, at this point in time, it seems to be bearing some fruit, which is a good thing.
Fantastic.
Anything that stops a child being sexually abused has got to be a good thing.
Yeah. I've got one last question for you, and it's very unrelated to everything so far, but curious to know, with the benefit of hindsight, what advice would you give John Rouse as a young adult?
Stick to rock and roll. I don't know, because that, you know, I mean, that was my sliding glass door moments when I first got out of school. I was in a touring band with supporting Eurogliders and Goanna and Pseudo Echo, and yeah. So going back, way back, I was torn between being a musician and law enforcement, and in the end I chose law enforcement. But I managed to keep the musical side still in my life. Look, I wouldn't change anything, in all honesty. You know, like, I'm really happy with the way things have gone forward. You'll make mistakes, everybody makes mistakes, and you look back on your decisions. But, you know, any decision I made was the right one at the time, for me. I can't look back and go, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, because that's the way I felt at the time that I made that decision. You know, if I was going to do one piece to myself, when I got that phone call saying I was promoted into the child abuse unit, I probably would have responded differently. You know, I was actually kind of, I can't do that, I've got a young daughter. And the response, which is not what we would do now, was, oh, lots of people have kids. We would not do that now. But my advice to myself would be embrace that and do everything you can.
Yeah. And you have, though.
Well, look, yeah, I mean, I've definitely dedicated the better part of my career to it. Like 25 years now, out of 37.
The impact that it has had on you personally, seeing the images that you've seen, how do you manage that as a human being to keep coming to work every day, to keep that optimism, and I appreciate that you have got so many achievements over time, but managing that trauma that that's just so commonplace in your life. You've mentioned music as an outlet.
Yeah.
Are there other things, I guess, that your colleagues do, or that you yourself have done to help to, I guess, live with that trauma and to still be, that motivated person that you are?
Yeah, well, look, it's not without trauma. It is. You'd be lying if you said this didn't have an effect on you, because it does. But then I go back to what I said before earlier, that law enforcement in general is about trauma. So that's kind of what you sign up for. Be like in the military, you understand what's going to happen when you get deployed offshore. You might lose your life. If not, you will definitely possibly see colleagues lose their lives. There's trauma. Post-traumatic stress exists in law enforcement. We know it. So you need to make some pretty conscious decisions about looking after yourself through that process. And the first thing I did around this work is adhere to the advice of the great-grandfather of victim identification, Anders Persson, who's a retired Swedish police officer, and that is, you are dealing with a crime scene. That image is a crime scene. The difference with our crime scenes is that we don't know where they are, and we have to work our way back. But if you treat it as an investigation and that there's clues in it and that your mission is to solve the crime, that's a good starting strategy.
Yeah.
And we get wins out of that. So if you're getting wins, it's positive reinforcement for it. So the second thing that I made sure I did was that once we've done a child rescue, I don't concern myself with the child past that. Okay, I don't think, I wonder what happened. No, I don't do that, because the baggage you would be carrying would be significant. So, and these are things that we talk to people who are coming into the crime type about. Your family, your friends are number one, okay? You need to make sure that this doesn't, as best as you possibly can, and I take it home too, time zones are a problem. I've got late night conference calls at 10 or 11 o'clock, because that aligns with Europe and the US. Sometimes you can't help it, but leave it at the door, go home. Don't change what you do in life that makes you happy now. Yeah. Exercise has been a big part. I was talking about getting up and doing those early morning rides. COVID hasn't helped that, but keep exercise in your life, eat as healthily as you possibly can, live life, try to see some good. The music part has been about seeing good. In police, we don't see a lot of good, but when I see 2,000 people at the Gympie Muster rocking out to our 80s show, that's a lot of happy people.
Brilliant.
I get something out of that is so polar opposite to being a police officer. So it's just about balance at the end of the day.
John Rouse, I cannot thank you enough for your time this morning, but more generally for the incredible contribution you make to child protection. So thank you for your time, but more so thank you for your tireless efforts over 30